We are expecting a busy Fab weekend this weekend with a whole bunch of interesting prospects who just got called up in the last couple days. We'll go over all those names and more here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody, to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Vivid Seats. Erik, Halterman, and Ryan Boyer here for the weekly Fab Pickups episode. And Ryan, it seems to happen every year in late April. A whole bunch of top prospects have finished working on their defense at the same time and all show up at the same time. Pretty exciting weekend, I think, compared to the last few in Fab. Is that what you're expecting coming up?
Yeah, funny how that works. That deadline to secure the extra year of team control has passed, and we're seeing more and more prospects. Still waiting for some. I'm going to lead my priority recommendations with one where we haven't seen quite yet. Suspect it's going to be soon, but yeah, it's an interesting time of the season. We get our eyes on some of the young potential stars that have arrived and soon to arrive.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We will get to those exciting names soon. But as always, we want to start with some of the headlines. They won't all be negative this week, but I do want to start with an injury that just happened about an hour ago. AJ Puk was placed on the injured list with left elbow inflammation. Inflammation isn't one of the worst words, but elbow is one of the worst words when it comes to pitcher injuries. So definitely pretty worried there. I don't think I'd be dropping him just yet until we find out that it might be something more serious than inflammation, but I'd certainly be pretty worried. Do you see any opportunities in Fab this weekend that this opens up? I mean, Justin Martinez, if he's still out there in a particularly shallow league, he goes from being one of two options to the clear top option. But do you expect some of Arizona's, third and fourth best options to get some saves or no?
Yeah, I figured we might have some casualties with what happened at Wrigley yesterday on the pitching side,
Yeah.
but AJ Puk did not pitch in that game, and he came down with a bum elbow, unfortunately. But yeah, hopefully it is just indeed inflammation. I think you should certainly do what you can if you have AJ Puk to hang on to him. I mean, I think it's probably just going to be more Justin Martinez in the ninth inning. I don't know why Torey Lovullo would go in another direction, especially since Kevin Ginkel is also injured. He's not an option right now. Shelby Miller's actually been really good for them, but yeah, I think it's if Justin Martinez is not universally rostered, which he pretty much should be already, he's going to go for a healthy fab bid for sure.
Yeah, a pretty respectable stat line for Martinez through 7 innings. He's got a pair of saves. He has an ERA of 0.00. He's got a whip of 0.57. He's got a strikeout rate of 39%, a walk rate of 4%, and why not? He's got a ground ball rate of 77% too. It just basically doesn't get any better than this. I guess he could strike out 50% of batters or something, but Justin Martinez is really, really good.
Yeah, the walk rate in particular is awesome to see because that's really his lone bugaboo, but he's finding the strike zone, which pretty much makes him borderline unhittable, I guess.
Yeah, seems like it. So good news, I guess, for those Justin Martinez drafters, although we hope for AJ Puk's sake that the news isn't that good. Moving on to another injury here. Ezekiel Tovar was just placed on the IL today. A hip contusion on this one, so doesn't sound like necessarily a particularly long-term absence. Aaron Schunk was called up to take his place on the roster and is starting at shortstop on Saturday. We did not throw Aaron Schunk onto our list today. Should we have?
I don't think so. I mean, it's probably going to be a lot of Kyle Farmer and Ideal Amador. For the Rockies, Farmer's been getting a lot of run at DH too with Chris Bryant's issues. Kind of makes him somewhat interesting, I guess, in deeper leagues. He's hasn't been a total zero from an offensive standpoint, and he has the Coors Field boost. But yeah, it seems like it's going to be a short-term absence for Tovar, and the replacements, especially with Tyro Estrada still sidelined as well. It's another middle infield option that's not going to be subbing in there. I don't think there's much fantasy goodness to be had here as a result. Seems like it could be just a 10-day absence for Tovar.
Yeah, we might get to some Rockies at the very end of the show in the budget hitters option, but there's not a lot on that team that rises above that level at this point. Elsewhere in injury news, we have a apparent setback of some sort for Grayson Rodriguez, who is on the IL due to elbow issues, but then was scratched from a bullpen session Thursday due to shoulder soreness. And then yesterday we learned he got his MRI results back. We don't know what they are, but he's receiving a second opinion on them. So I assume the first opinion was, wow, you have the best shoulder I've ever seen. I want to show it off to all my friends, right?
Yeah, I think it was actually multiple more opinions that he's expected to receive, but that's not always bad news, but generally isn't great news. When the first opinion comes back and they don't share that and they're waiting for subsequent opinions. But yeah, added to the list for Grayson Rodriguez, unfortunately, the elbow / triceps thing or whatever that was in spring training. And you add that, of course, to he missed the final 2 months or so of last year with a right lat strain. I guess technically this is different with the shoulder, maybe not, but elbow, triceps, shoulder, lat, everything basically with his pitching arm has been hurting over the last 6-7 months. I guess he could come down with a forearm injury next, and that would complete check all the boxes. But I mean, he's before we even hear, I think, what the results are of the second and third, or however many opinions, I think he's probably a drop basically anywhere.
Okay. I was going to ask, are you? I might hold on just to one more week and hope that we. The thing is, I'm not somebody who drafted him because I was worried about this injury history, but I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of someone who took him pretty early. I might hold on one more week just to see what the second opinion is, but in this situation, we're not optimistic about what that opinion will be, right?
Right. I mean, certainly if you have the roster space available, sure, go ahead and hang on to him. But I mean, especially in like an NFBC type league where you do not have IL spots, I would not be losing a ton of sleep over dropping Grayson Rodriguez. As high as his upside is when he's healthy, it just doesn't look very positive for him moving forward.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. There is a related bit of news for the Orioles. Brandon Young making his debut today, and with Rodriguez set to probably be out for some time, there could be a semi-permanent spot open in the Orioles rotation. Brandon Young, sort of a prospect. He's 26 years old. That's kind of older than we would consider most prospects, and he's yet to make his major league debut. So, he's not amazing, but he did sneak into the final quarter of James Anderson's top 400 prospects here at RotoWire. So there's something here, and there's the potential, again, for a somewhat permanent rotation spot on a team that at least thinks it's competitive this year. Any interest in Brandon Young?
A little bit, I guess, in your deeper formats. I mean, he ultimately profiles, I think, as more of a back end rotation type. I think James has him as the number 9 prospect in the Orioles system, which is still a good system, but not as good as it was a couple of years ago. And some of those prospects have graduated. Yeah, I think it's probably more streamer territory, but he's the kind of guy that if you have the roster space, if you can afford to go ahead and stick him on your bench, see how today's start goes. I guess he would be in line for one start again next week. Zach Eflin still at least a couple weeks away, but there is the potential for him to stick around a little while. But yeah, I think it's more if your league is deep enough, stash him and see how he looks today, maybe in his next start, and think of him as more of a streamer type.
Yeah, I think as long as Young has a acceptable enough start today, it's home against the Reds. I think I'll at least include him on some waterfalls. I don't know if he'll be the priority, though. I appreciate everybody throwing out names in the chat already. It's a good list today. We're actually going to cover a good number of them already. So if I don't jump them in now, stick around. There's one more name I want to get to in the headlines section, but he sort of is a transition towards our priority ads. That's Cam Smith, who was the talk of spring training. Everybody wanted him as their sleeper. And then everybody dropped him after just a few games when he couldn't get going. It was really, really quickly, though, that he was getting dropped. It was like a week and a half where he had only had a few hits. And the thing is, he had started to sit. So it looked like maybe he was on his way back to the minors already. He's down to just 26% rostership rate on Yahoo. I think he should be rising. He just had 2 homers yesterday. If we look at Cam Smith's season line, only hitting .224, but a 745 OPS. It's good for a 117 WRC plus. He's looking like a competent major league hitter. And I think I really screwed this up in Glarf last week. I think this is the toughest type of player to figure out what to bid on because he was dropped the week before for, I think, pretty reasonable reasons. Actually dropped by Dave McDonald and then picked up again by Dave McDonald 1 week later. He bid 67, a runner-up of 62, and I was only in the 40s. It's just so tough to figure out, is everybody in on this guy like they were 2 weeks ago, or is everybody out on him like they were 1 week ago? Well, if you missed out on Cam Smith last weekend, you might get another shot this weekend. Are you back to all in? Where do you sit these days?
It's tough to say back to all in and redrafts, but I mean, I think he should be basically universally rostered still. So you're saying that fantasy managers can be a little impatient early on in the season? Is that what you're getting at?
And again, even in this was Glarf. This is a league full of people who have played a lot of fantasy baseball. It's a deep 15-team league. Even there, it seemed like the right thing to cut him. And then 1 week later, the exact same person said it was the right move to add him right again.
Yeah, and TG FBI, which you and I are in the same league together, I decided this was going to be first of all, I was waiting for Cam Smith basically to get outfield eligibility because of the way my roster was constructed. While he was getting off to a slow start, I didn't really have room for him in my lineup anyway. And I was waiting for that outfield eligibility. He finally got it. And this is the weekend. I saw the schedule. I think they're facing Michael King today and Dylan Cease tomorrow. So I thought, this is a good weekend to put Cam Smith on my bench for the weekend. But TGFBI, other NFBC drafts, you can make roster changes for Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well. So I did that, put Cam Smith on my bench. So I missed out on those 2 home runs last night. So basically, I'm just looking for some sympathy.
Yeah. Well, at least you didn't cut him.
Congrats. Didn't cut him. Still hanging on. But yeah, the upside's obviously massive still. I think he should basically be universally rostered. He was batting 9th last night, I think.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if he's batted that low before. I know he's at 8th a handful of times. Certainly should be room for him to creep back up in the batting order. Hopefully last night is a sign of things to come. The hard hit rate is well above average right now. He's striking out a decent amount, but not like in an obscene level. I think it's like right at a little under 28%. So that's not too bad. But yeah, I would be hanging on Cam Smith for sure. And if he's out there available in your league, he should be part of the priority ads as well.
All right, so Cam Smith, a bonus priority ad this week. We don't want to talk about him every single week, but go get him now, and then we won't have to. We are going to move to our priority ads right after this message from Vivid Seats, who reminds us that finally baseball is back. This MLB season, knock it out of the park with Vivid Seats and score great tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every fastball, every home run, and every eye-popping play of your favorite team, live and in person. Plus, with Vivid Seats rewards, you earn rewards with every single purchase. Just buy 10 tickets, then cash in your credit toward your free 11th ticket. Talk about an easy win, and here's a pro reward tip. When buying tickets for your whole group, split the bill and make progress toward your free 11th ticket even faster. From behind the dugout to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2025 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, experience it live. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. And we're back here on the Saturday Fab edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer going over the top priority ads this week. Now, this section is often players for shallower leagues. We use players who are rostered in less than half of Yahoo leagues as the cutoff here. But it's also your priority players for all leagues, these call-ups who you're just grabbing for the first time, and everyone's going to want them. That certainly describes the first player on the list, Chandler Simpson, who is a player who looks like he should have been playing in 1925, not 2025, maybe even 1895 or something like that. A real throwback is Chandler Simpson. He has never hit a professional over-the-fence home run. He has one inside the Parker. He also stole 104 bases last year, while striking out just 8.5% of the time. He's regularly run single-digit strikeout rates, which has meant very high batting averages. He was at 355 last year. Now, he doesn't hit the ball hard at all, but he hits it all the time. And you may have seen a highlight of his earlier this season. It stuck with me. He hit a routine ground ball to the first baseman, and he beat it out for an infield single. That's not fair. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. Chandler Simpson can do that. This is a very lopsided skill set. So if you are already, top of the league in steals and you're short in power, you shouldn't even really necessarily throw a bid in on Chandler Simpson. Maybe in a league with trades, go at him and trade him. But if you're behind in steals, he could lead the league in steals. I think that's absolutely not out of the realm of possibility here, assuming he plays enough, and he's leading off in his major league debut today. So I think the Rays are pretty interested in him. Just how crazy should we be going for Chandler Simpson? I mean, north of 20% with our bids, I'm pretty sure. North of 40%? I mean, it's going to get wild.
Yeah, that's what I was just checking to see where he was batting today, and I see that he is at leadoff. So that's, he could have very easily been batting ninth for a while. So that's a big news item there. Is he ultimately going to hit enough? This contact rates, as you mentioned, like he just never strikes out. But a guy with such little power, you worry he could be a bit of a Billy Hamilton-esque guy. He just kind of gets the bat knocked out of his hand at the major league level. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Chandler Simpson, but certainly a possibility when you have that little thump in your bat. But I mean, he's going to be probably set the record for these first couple weeks for fab bids. I would think it's going to be the highest bid that we've seen in any league so far, just because he can be such a difference maker with that speed, and potentially batting average as well. And if he's going to be hitting leadoff consistently, could be a good run scored source as well. So you're talking about three categories that he's going to be contributing in, even if he's basically a zero, and definitely going to be a zero in one of the
Literal
categories.
Zero, yeah.
Yeah, probably basically a zero in the other one. But it's a difference-making skill set for sure. What is how high of a fab bid do you go with? It depends on your needs, really. If you need stolen bases desperately, you could talk yourself into using 40-50% of your fab, I think. It really just depends on your situation. I'm very interested to see in NFBC drafts the wide range of bids and for Chandler Simpson. But I mean, at the low end, I think you're going to have to go probably 20+% if you expect to land him.
Yeah, and I would expect in some like NFBC main event leagues, we're going to see some crazy numbers. I think we're going to
Yeah.
see 60, 70% maybe even in some of these
Yeah.
leagues, because he could single-handedly, especially in a league with an overall component like that and some real financial incentive for finishing very high in the overall. Chandler Simpson can give you a ton of points in one category alone there, more than he'll be able to lose you in the others. Of course, it might not work. He could be back in the minors. He could be playing 2 to 3 games a week. He could be turned into Dairon Blanco or something. This is the Rays we're talking about. But I have a lot more faith in him than I have in a Billy Hamilton or an Esturi Ruiz or a Malik Smith. And it's because of that truly outlier contact rate. I mean, none of those other guys were running single-digit strikeout rates. They were good contact hitters, but that was, 15, 18% strikeout rates in the minors. This is something else. And I'm pretty sure it's going to work. So I could endorse some whatever bid you're comfortable with. I think on Chandler Simpson, be aware of the downside and know whether or not you actually need him. But if you do, the highest bid you're comfortable with is the bid you'll probably need to get Chandler Simpson. Should we move on to somebody who is a little bit more in a normal sphere of things?
Yeah, this guy is not arrived yet, but we think Nick Kurtz is probably going to be here soon. The A's are certainly setting it up, I think, for his arrival in the near future. Off to an amazing start at AAA Las Vegas this season. Former number 4 overall pick from last year. 329, 388, 697, 7 home runs, 7 doubles in his first 18 games at AAA Las Vegas. That was after he had a great spring as well. 974 OPS, a couple home runs, more walks than strikeouts during spring training. Brent Rooker has played the outfield in 3 of the last 6 games for the A's. They're even talking about maybe using Tyler Soderstrom at third base some. That seems like an extreme long shot considering he's never played third base before. And he's also in the midst of what looks to be a breakout offensive season. I can't imagine that they want to mess with that. Miguel Andujar has had a nice year himself so far, but he really should not be standing in the way of Nick Kurtz's arrival. It's just the path of least resistance is sticking Brent Rooker back in the outfield on a more regular basis, which they have been doing more of late, and having Kurtz and Tyler Soderstrom kind of bounce back and forth between first base and DH. Kurtz is like a Gold Glove level type defender at first base as well, but I don't know that they want to put Tyler Soderstrom exclusively at DH. I think they'll probably just kind of bounce back and forth between those 2 spots, as I mentioned. But yeah, I think Nick Kurtz has got to be arriving soon. As you know, in Tout Wars, if you make a free agent acquisition, you have to start them for that week. In this past week, I thought, okay, well, Nick Kurtz probably isn't going to arrive this week, but I'll throw out a smaller bid, take the 0 for him for this upcoming week, and it'll work out for me in the long run. So threw out $4, and then he went for 87.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, not even remotely close to other people were on the same wavelength as me as far as being willing to take a 0 for the week for Nick Kurtz in the anticipation that he's going to arrive soon. And is it next week? Is it the week after? I don't know, but I'm guessing it's going to be before the end of April, beginning of May at the latest for Nick Kurtz. And it's going to depend whether he's actually officially been called up as far as the level of bid that's going to take to land him. If we're working on the assumption that he has not been called up yet and you're just looking to stash him, it's still going to take a double-digit bid, I think.
Apparently. Your experience says so.
Maybe 12-ish%, 10-ish%. And I mean, if there is even more buzz or if he's actually called up before then, I don't know if he's going to go as high as Chandler Simpson. Maybe he will. He probably will, right? You think he would go even higher than Chandler Simpson?
I think it's Simpson's outlier profile, his just extremes. I think there's going to be teams who say, I need that. Whereas Kurtz, I mean, he could potentially be extreme power, but I think the expectation for him is that he's going to be, a pretty standard power hitter. He can mash.
Right.
Is he going to mash at an MVP level right away? Almost definitely not, but he'll be able to help your team. And I think if he's just a normal good player, he'll get some real bids, but I don't know if we're talking the insane things I expect to see from Simpson. Could be wrong though.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right read. But even if he's not officially called up going into this fab period, like I said, I still think it's going to take a double-digit percentage bid to get him.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. He has done nothing but hit at every stop, even though he only has 30 professional games under his belt. He looks quite ready, so we should see him soon. My next guy here is another call-up. Caleb Durbin was just recalled Friday by the Brewers for his Major League debut. And basically, if you take everything we said about Chandler Simpson and turn it down from a 12 to like a 7, that's Caleb Durbin. Also move him into the infield dirt. He'll be eligible at second base, I believe, in most leagues, but he'll be playing third for the Brewers, so should pick up extra eligibility there soon. And Caleb Durbin, again, he's in the same mold as Simpson, but nowhere near the same extremes. This is a contact-first guy who can really run. But when we say really run, we're talking, 30-something steals in the minors, not 100. And when we say contact first, well, he still did hit 10 homers last year, not 0 for his entire career. But he does still have the single-digit strikeout rate that Simpson had, just barely. It was 9.9% last year, but it was 6.2% the year before that. So this is another guy who is elite in terms of getting his bat on the ball. So he can get to first base and he can steal second. That's a pretty useful player. And there's a little bit of power here. There's a path, a pretty clear path, I should say, to quite a lot of playing time at third base. There really was no competition at the position on opening day, but, the Brewers managed to get an extra year of team control by using not Caleb Durbin, but Oliver Dunn for a couple of weeks. Don't know if that'll come back to haunt them in the end, but Durbin just has to hold off Dunn or Vinny Capra to keep the job. I think he can do that. And I think he's going to help your team in speed. Maybe it's, more 20, 25 steals in his first major league season. This is not somebody who's going to single-handedly win you the category. But, we're looking at a future somewhat like Bryce Terang's recent seasons for a Brewers teammate there. That would be what you're hoping for. Maybe a 10-30 type of player with somebody who could get you a pretty decent batting average, perhaps. You sometimes wonder these guys who hit the ball all the time but don't hit it very hard if they're going to run a low BABIP and hit, 260 instead of 290. But a single-digit strikeout rate in the minors, that's just something I can't turn down. So I'm a big fan of Caleb Durbin. I think he's going to take double digits as well in leagues where he's still out there, maybe 12 to 14-ish, or do you think you need even more?
Yeah, it might take a little bit more than that. I'll say this, as far as just kind of similar-ish profiles with Chandler Simpson and Caleb Durbin. I think Durbin's my guess is he's going to wind up being the better buy of the two, and it's because of the clearer path to playing time. I could definitely see a scenario where Chandler Simpson just doesn't hit for a few weeks, and Josh Lowe is his rehab's coming along. Johnny DeLuca is going to be back fairly soon. Don't know if they want to bury Christopher Morel. They could conceivably play him more in the infield, but there's definitely a clearer path to playing time for Caleb Durbin. I think he should get a longer leash. So I would take Chandler Simpson out of the two of them, but I think Caleb Durbin could wind up being a better buy if Chandler Simpson does go for those 40, 50% type fab bids.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. You got one more rookie for us in this section?
Got another young guy for us, guy who's already arrived in the majors, Edgar Quero of the White Sox. Was the choice over Kyle Teal, who had more buzz, but I think Quero actually is probably a better offensive prospect than Kyle Teal. Off to a great start at AAA this year before getting promoted. 333, 444, 412. One home run, a 17.5% walk rate in the early going at AAA Charlotte. Made a mechanical adjustment around midseason last year, and from then on hit 333, 410, 527 with 9 home runs and a 15.7% strikeout rate, 9.6% walk rate over his final 56 games between Double and Triple A. And I mean, that's good for anyone, but when you consider he's also was 21 at the time and a switch hitting catcher, even more impressive. He's now turned 22 just earlier this month, I believe. The catching, as far as defense goes, I think you definitely give Kyle Teal the edge in that regard, but I think Quero might have a higher offensive upside with him. Obviously, the team context is not great, but pretty favorable ballpark for him to be hitting in. A young catcher, you kind of always worry about. They could be so overwhelmed with the non-offensive things that they have to worry about that they just don't hit much in the early going. That's often the case with young catchers. Certainly could be the case with Quero as well, but I think if you're looking to add a second catcher, if you're pretty desperate to pick up a second catcher, probably should be willing to put in a pretty healthy bid for Quero. Is he going to be double digits? Going to take double digits to get him as well? If you really need that second catcher, I think I'd be willing to go there in the 10 to 12% range. Might ultimately not quite cost that much, but if you really need it, I could see going to that length.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good year for catching prospects. So I deliberately went weak at second catcher in a few leagues, knowing that I'd have the option to go for Quero, or there's actually a total of 6 prospects in James's top 100 who are catchers with an ETA of 2025. Quero's one of them, but also Samuel Basayo, Dalton Rushing, Agustin Ramirez, Harry Ford, and Kyle Teal. Drake Baldwin, just outside the top 100, is already here. And there's some more guys just outside the top 50, like Adrian Del Castillo and Moises Ballesteros. This is a good year for catching prospects coming up. They're not all going to work out, but if you're in a position where your second catcher wasn't very good, which is, the case for a lot of people, second catchers tend not to be very good, you're going to have some options, but I'd go for all of them, starting with Quero for sure. Moving on to my next guy here, Austin Hayes. He is somebody who was available in more than 90% of Yahoo leagues. The deeper leagues have mostly held on to him, even though he missed the start of the year with a fairly minor calf issue, a calf strain. He just returned Tuesday, and he's settling in as the Reds cleanup hitter, that's enough for me. I'll take anybody who is batting fourth at one of the best hitters parks in the league and playing pretty much every day. Now, Austin Hayes, he's nothing special, but he's better than he was last year. Last year, he dealt with some injuries, and also it was a kidney infection, pretty unusual one, but it seems like that probably affected his performance even when he wasn't on the IL, perhaps. Had a career low 699 OPS last year, but over the previous 3 years, it was a 752 OPS, which again, nothing special, but when you add in a good park, a great lineup spot, an everyday job, somebody can get you 20 homers and hit, 260-ish while playing every day and getting the boost to runs and RBI that come with that lineup spot. That's pretty good, even in a pretty shallow format. So I don't think you need to go crazy for Austin Hayes. I think he's already snapped up in the deeper leagues and in the shallow leagues. A 3 outfielder league, he probably is right on the borderline, but I do think you want to go get him if you need an outfielder. So don't throw too much at him, 2 to 4, 3 to 5, somewhere in that range, but do go get him.
I'm going to go with Pavin Smith, who has been mentioned in the chat as well. We seem to be on the same wavelength as a lot of the chatters this week. Lots of names that we're have in common here. Pavin Smith is a guy I was on a lot in draft season. I do have one regret in one league. I wound up cutting him. I think it was when I picked up Luke Jackson, which has worked out from the Luke Jackson side of things, but I wish I had picked someone else other than Pavin Smith to cut. That was a move that's not looking great right now because Pavin Smith has been awesome. 408, 500 on base percentage in the early going, 735 slugging percentage. He's got 3 home runs in his first 19 games. Batted third each of the last 13 games that the Diamondbacks have faced a right-handed pitcher. That's especially good when you have Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte batting in front of you. Currently, Corbin Carroll and Geraldo Perdomo batting in front of you. He's not started a game yet against a lefty this season. He has, however, entered mid-game in 5 of those 6 games, so doesn't mean he's not going to get any plate appearances if he doesn't happen to be starting that day. So factor that into Pavin Smith's outlook as far as at-bats go. 22.6% barrel rate in the 98th percentile. He's been trading contact for damage this year. He's a guy who has ran pretty low strikeout rates, but this year it's up over 31%. And certainly with the damage he's doing, that's been worth the trade-off. He's got first base eligibility. He's got outfield eligibility. Currently, he's hitting third in the Diamondbacks lineup consistently. Believer in the skill set. He started to show a bit of it last year with the harder contact and has really carried it over to even more hard contact this year. Former first-round pick who really seems to be figuring it out now in his late 20s. Do I wish he had a everyday job? Sure. But that's why he's still available in some leagues, because he is technically a platoon bat. He's just in a great situation, and I do believe in the breakout for Pavin Smith. If he's still out there in your league, I think it's going to take at least 8, 9, 10% to land him. He's pretty well rostered right now, but still out there in some leagues.
Yeah, we got a question in the chat here. Would you drop Kyle Manzardo for him? I think that's a pretty interesting one. Manzardo has a 126 WRC plus, but that's a lot has to do with a 15% walk rate. He's only hitting 190. He does have 4 homers. Some mixed results for him. Maybe a bit more playing time, though I don't think he's been in there against every lefty. Would you rather have Pavin Smith or Kyle Manzardo?
I would lean Manzardo just because of the playing time aspect, but also keep in mind that Manzardo should be only util only in most eligible in most leagues. So can you afford to roster a guy who's not eligible at any position yet? Pavin Smith, as I mentioned, eligible at first base and outfield, so that's a factor in your decision. Just for the bat and the playing time, I think I would still lean Manzardo, but that's pretty close.
Yeah, I think that is pretty borderline. I think I would side with a little bit more playing time and stick Manzardo, but it's close. We also had a Pavin Smith or Ben Rice. You got to go Ben Rice on that one. And Ben Rice has 2 highly owned to qualify for today's podcast, but I do notice he's still out there in over a third of Yahoo leagues. I don't think he should be out there really in any leagues. I just included him on a bat speed risers article that was published yesterday. He's one of the biggest bat speed risers this season. Makes it even easier to buy into everything he's doing.
Only downside with Ben Rice is he's hitting so good that he's probably not going to pick up that catcher eligibility.
Right. But he is hitting like a star first baseman, so I don't think people are going to mind. Let's move on to the pitchers, the priority pitchers here. And I'm going to start with Hayden Wesneski, who is off to a good start depending on where you look. If you look at ERA, Hayden Wesneski is off to an okay start. He's at an even 4. But if you like your ERA estimator, Sierra has him at 270. He's got a 0.72 whip. He's striking out 31% of opposing batters and walking 4%. He's not keeping the ball on the ground, though, and he's giving up too many homers, and that could be a problem. Somebody who's a sweeper-heavy guy doesn't necessarily have the tools to get out opposite-handed hitters, can get himself into some trouble, would maybe consider sitting him against the particularly lefty-heavy lineups or something like that. But I'm not sure I'd consider sitting him against hardly anybody right now, as long as these strikeout and walk numbers are quite this elite. We do have to see what he does tonight. Maybe he's going to get lit up by the Padres against another sweeper ex-Yankees prospect, Michael King, and that one will be interesting to watch that game. But Hayden Wesneski, I'm pretty convinced. I could become less convinced again if he gets absolutely lit up by the Padres, but I like everything we're seeing here. I think Hayden Wesneski deserves to be owned in pretty much all formats and would throw out a modest bid at least. I think the fact that the ERA isn't great might mean you don't need to go that crazy. But I think at least a 6 to 8% on Hayden Wesneski, I'm buying in.
I got Tyler Mahle as my next recommendation, and his ERA is great. 0.92, 0.86 whip, and a 21-9 strikeout to walk rate in his first 19 and 2/3 innings, averaging just 91.9 miles per hour with his four-seamer. That's down from, it was about 94 at its peak during his time with the Reds. But that pitch has a 41% whiff rate. That's second among starters for four-seam fastballs. Will Warren's actually number one in that regard, even though he has not off to a great start. I found that interesting. But yeah, Tyler Mahle's kind of got that invisible with his fastball. He's comes from a lower angle and throws a lot of high fastballs, and it's just really hard for hitters to catch up to it. He does have the Dodgers next. I think he faces them Sunday. But then after that, he's at San Francisco. So-so matchup. Then he's got the Mariners at home and the Rockies at home after that. That's tentative how he lines up for those next few starts. So could get rocked against the Dodgers. The ERA was probably due for a correction. Because that ERA is so kind of sparkling, maybe it's going to take a pretty healthy bid to get him. If it does, I don't think I would go there. I'd be willing to go 6-7% probably for Tyler Mahle if I need a starter, but because that velocity is down and because of the injury history, I don't want to buy all in on him, but he has shown the ability in the past certainly to miss bats even without the premium velocity, and the high fastball and the splitter pair pretty well together for Tyler Mahle.
Yeah, a pitcher who's been pretty good before and is pitching for a team that's off to a pretty good start, should have good chances to add to his already 3 wins. I like Tyler Mahle enough, even if he's not somebody you can get too excited about. My next guy here, Luis L. Ortiz, who got a W, not an L, I believe, in his last start against his old team, the Pirates. He struck out 8 in 5 innings in that one, allowed just 2 runs. That came after he struck out 10 Royals in 5 2/3 innings, allowing just 1 run on 1 hit the start before. Now, those 2 performances, all they did was lower his ERA to 5.48 because he had a blow up in his first outing and then was okay in his second start. It was a quality start, but just 3 strikeouts. But the main reason we like Luis Ortiz is the Guardians have a pretty good pitching coaching staff. We like their ability to make their pitchers better. Certainly more, I think, than we would say in Pittsburgh, where Ortiz was before. Although, to be fair, Pittsburgh's had more interesting pitchers come through lately. But in any case, I think it would be considered an upgrade. And anybody who changes organizations, I'm actually a little bit interested in, just to see what the new coaching staff is going to do. And so this looks to me like someone who people have always said he's got pretty good stuff. He just hasn't had great results with that stuff. So let's see if an organization like Cleveland can make a few tweaks and get more out of him. To me, that looks like what happened here. He had 2 starts where he wasn't great, and then he had 2 where he was better. That looks like the changes are starting to happen already. And if we look at some of his pitch type changes, it looks like he was throwing 3 different fastballs. He has fastball, cutter, and sinker. And in the first 2 outings, or I guess 4-seamer, cutter, and sinker. In the first 2 outings, the cutter and sinker were pretty even. But in the last 2, he's throwing way more cutters than sinkers. So that's just a small change. But if you're looking for something backing up, is he actually a different guy these last 2 starts when he learned to strike batters out? There's something, and we expected to see something like this, right? So the narrative really backs up these 2 strong starts from Luis L. Ortiz. So I'm pretty interested. I don't think he's going to be an ace, but I think he's somebody who can be rostered in not just the deepest of leagues. So don't go crazy, but 2 to 4%, maybe 3 to 5%. I think Luis Ortiz is for real to some level.
Yeah, he was so bad in spring training and in his first start of the season that you worried he might even lose that spot in the Guardians rotation. I was kind of wondering if he was actually locked into a spot because I think he walked like twice as many batters as he struck out in spring training. Just really looks rough, but it does look like as you mentioned, it looks like he's kind of buying into what the Guardians are selling him in these last couple of starts, especially from a bat missing perspective. Been very encouraging for Luis L. Ortiz. My next guy, we're going to go to the relief pitching side, David Bednar. Just in the interest of full disclosure, I did have him on here before he was actually recalled. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that because my first little snippet on David Bednar is time to stash, ? Because, well, I didn't think he was coming up yet, but he is now. And he's coming up because he looked like he got back on track at AAA Indianapolis. 5 appearances there, 0 runs, just 1 hit, 7 strikeouts, and 0 walks for David Bednar. Dennis Santana has done a solid job filling in as a closer for the Pirates, but he's also not really missing bats. I mean, I think the Pirates want David Bednar to get that closer job back. I don't imagine that they're going to give it back to him soon. But velocity was never really an issue with him. He was throwing hard last year when he struggled. He was throwing plenty hard enough early in the year this year when he struggled. So maybe it's just a command thing. Maybe it's a bit of a confidence thing, but hopefully he got back on track in the minors. I can't say I'm optimistic that it's going to work out for David Bednar. He is a reliever who's had lots of struggles in the last year and a half. But I think the Pirates want him to be that closer. I think it's time to scoop him back up and find out whether he actually is going to get that job back. And I can't imagine there's going to be a kind of a feeding frenzy to get David Bednar. Maybe if you're really desperate for saves, you can put out a healthy bid for him, but I don't think it's going to take a ton to get him back. What do you think? 7-8%? It could change based on if they come out and say anything about his role before Sunday. That can certainly change how people are going to view him prior to the FAB bidding period. But I would be cautious, but I do think he's worth scooping back up.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to take more than that to get him because I think he probably is going to get the chance to close again quite soon, or at least the Pirates are going to want him to. If he doesn't, it's because he's terrible again, and which that is the downside there. And if you're valuing him at $7 to $9, that's because you're 7 to 9%. That's because you're factoring in the very real downside that what if this isn't magically fixed with 5 appearances in the minors? Things don't tend to be magically fixed if you've been slumping for a year and a half. So I think that is in many ways a fair price, but I think the winning price is going to be higher because, I mean, think about it. Anytime we have a confirmed closer who comes back, you sometimes have to go into the 20s to get that guy, right? And David Bednar was the confirmed closer for most of the last several years. I think that it might take a lot, and it might be wrong to go that high, but I think if you are in a position of needing saves, I think you're going to have to bid quite a bunch. We're going to move to the deep league pitchers. I just want to throw out real quick, Liam Hendriks was mentioned here. He is back from injury. Maybe he belongs as a deep league pitcher ad. I think for me, Aroldis Chapman's pitched well enough that I don't really see the need to go in that direction. Would you feel otherwise?
No, I'm with you. I'm fine with rostering him in deeper leagues to kind of see where it goes, but I don't think he's close to getting that closer job.
All right. Should we move on then to the actual pitchers who we are recommending for deep leagues? Who are you starting with?
Let's do it. Andrew Abbott. Quite a start yesterday. 11 strikeouts, just 1 run, 2 hits, and 6 innings in Baltimore. It's good in his first start back as well. In between those 2 starts, he's allowed just 2 runs with a 16-3 strikeout to walk rate over 11 innings. Average just 91.2 miles per hour with his fastball. That's down from last year and the year before. But 34.5% whiff rate with that pitch. He's been getting whiffs with the changeup and the curveball. as well. I think the big question with Andrew Abbott is, can he get back to his 2023 level strikeout rate, which was a perfectly healthy 26.1% before it fell off dramatically last year. Remember, this is a guy who in the minors had a 34.9% strikeout rate. He was always the kind of guy that you wondered how much of those strikeouts would translate to the big league level, because he doesn't really have like wipeout stuff. But he did miss bats that rookie year at a healthy amount, fell back last year, and so far this year showing the ability to miss bats again. And I mean, he's in the budget section. I don't think it's going to take a ton to get Andrew Abbott. He's obviously got the Cincy ballpark working against him. He's also a fly ball pitcher, so I think you should be prepared for some clunkers here and there. But I do think Andrew Abbott does have a skosh of upside. So as far as a deeper league ad, he's one to look at.
Yeah, I thought that we were going to see more from Andrew Abbott based on just how extreme his minor league strikeout numbers are. But he is a pretty small left-hander who averages about 92 on his fastball. And so that doesn't necessarily translate to a ton of whiffs. So I'm not sure exactly where it's going to settle. But for somebody who's shown pretty interesting things in his line in the past and is showing it through 2 starts now, I definitely want to take a look in leagues where it makes sense. My deep league pitcher to start with here is JT Ginn of the Athletics. He is somebody who failed to win an opening day roster spot, but is getting his chance pretty quickly. And the real thing that's interesting here is his velocity is up on most of his pitches, or all of his pitches. Coming back, well, it looks like there's some different pitch classifications on some of his pitches too. Some things are saying he's now throwing a cutter instead of a 4-seamer, but his sinker is up. His changeup and his slider are up too. He looks like a different pitcher than he was in the past. And the guy we saw in the past with JT Ginn in 34 innings last year, that's 6 starts and 2 relief appearances, that guy was okay. 4.24 ERA, a 4.01 Sierra. Struck out just 20% of opposing batters, which is below average, but far from bad. And he made up for it with a 6% walk rate and a 47% ground ball rate. It's interesting enough back-end starter for deep leagues, and now he's added velocity this year. Had 1 good start against the Mets, 6 strikeouts, 2 walks, 1 run in 5 1/3. Wasn't great his last time out against the Brewers, 3 runs allowed in 4 2/3 innings, but did strike out 7 against just 2 walks. So that gives him a 13-4 strikeout to walk rate through 2 starts. That's enough here with that and the added velocity. I think he shouldn't have a very hard time holding down a permanent roster spot in Sacramento. Pretty terrible place to pitch, it seems like, but usable enough in a decent enough number of his starts. I think JT Ginn looks like a pretty capable back-end MLB starter to me.
Yeah, Andre Palante, also a capable back-end starter, I believe. He's my next recommendation. Had 1 bad inning against the Mets on Thursday in his last start, but rebounded from that and wound up going 6 innings. He's got a 3.22 ERA, 1.08 WHIP in his first 4 starts. He's not going to miss bats, but Andre Palante is really good at 2 things. He's really good at inducing ground balls. That rate was in the 98th percentile in 2024. He's also elite at avoiding the opponent's barrel, also in the 98th percentile in 2024. He's upped his slider usage in 2025 a lot so far, and that has produced a 43.5% whiff rate. So maybe you could hold out hope that he's going to miss more bats. But this really is about him just being very good at 2 things. They're not the most exciting things for fantasy purposes, but when you combine an elite ground ball rate with an elite quality of contact rate, I think that can be sustainable. He's also shown some strides with his control. So he's not going to be a bat misser, almost surely. Maybe the slider produces more. I'm not optimistic about that. But I think from a ERA, maybe a whip perspective, Andre Palante could be a solid source, even if he's more of a floor play than a ceiling play.
Yeah, but as long as he keeps the ball on the ground very well, then I think there's something there. And he certainly does that. 66.5% for his career, 67.2% this year. That's an outlier trait, and that's enough to make me buy into Andre Palante when I otherwise might not. My next deep league pitcher here, I'm not excited about this, but Colin Ray, he's okay. He is taking the spot that was Justin Steele's in the Cubs rotation. Now, either Ray or Ben Brown could lose the job in about 2 weeks when Javier Assad comes back, but Javier Assad isn't really all that different from Colin Ray. It could also be Assad to the bullpen for a little bit until the next injury comes in. So there's, a rotation spot for at least a couple more turns and potentially for 5 more months available for Ray, who has been serviceable. Nothing more, but nothing less since returning from Japan a couple years ago. He's now thrown 306 innings in this MLB stint, mostly with the Brewers over the last 2 years, but a bit with the Cubs this year. 4.26 ERA, 1.23 whip over that stretch. He's basically just a league average pitcher. He's got a 20% strikeout rate, which is not good enough, but a 6% walk rate, which is good. This year, he only has a 1.8% walk rate. So Colin Ray, not going to kill you. He's going to keep the Cubs in games. I would say when you get good weather at Wrigley Field, you can use him. Although, actually, he was the starter in yesterday's insane wind game. He got through 4 2/3, only allowed 1 earned run, struck out 5, and walked none. And then the winds picked up late in the game. We saw 21 runs scored across 2 innings, was it? Colin Ray, most of his starts at Wrigley Field are going to be fine. He's not exciting, but he's fine. For deep leagues, that's good enough.
I'm going to move to the reliever side with my next recommendation. The Mike Clevenger closer era with the White Sox is over. Before it began, I guess. We're still waiting to figure out who exactly is the closer with the White Sox. And I think it might be Jordan Leisure. White Sox have 4 wins so far. They have 0 saves among those 4 wins. If you look back just a year ago, there was some buzz with Jordan Leisure. I know he was very impressive in spring training. Ultimately didn't work out for him during the regular season. He also dealt with some shoulder problems. Control is a problem with him, but he's also got a 42.9% whiff rate so far this season. That's in the 99th percentile. You look back at his minor league track record, 35.5% strikeout rate. I think he's probably the best arm in that bullpen. I mean, it's certainly a situation that I would not blame you if you just wanted to ignore it. The combination of a bad team and a lot of bad arms, might just not be worth it. But Jordan Leisure, I think, could actually be a pretty decent reliever. And I mean, the White Sox have to win some games every now and then. So if you're digging deep enough for saves, I think he's worth a look.
All right, we're going to move on to our deep league hitters, although I do want to real quick round up a couple pitchers who are mentioned in the chat here. Ryan Gusto has been pitching okay for the Astros through the last couple turns, but he's a 26-year-old rookie who was a non-prospect, and I don't know if I can really get too much behind it. Very deep leagues there for me. Cade Horton is somebody I should have mentioned when I was talking about the Cubs options. He's been at AAA in 3 starts, has a 1.46 ERA, a 37.5% strikeout rate, but a 21% walk rate. This came after he walked 14% of batters in 5 AAA starts last year. I want to see Cade Horton find the zone before I think that he's about to come up. One more here, though, Matt Liberatore. He is available in a lot of leagues and is not walking anyone and is kind of maybe good now. Is he? Are you buying into Matt Liberatore at all?
I'm still a little hesitant. It's been certainly encouraging, his start that he's gotten off to so far. As you mentioned, I think he's just walked 1 batter so far this season. He's never been a guy who's had like terrible control, but he's certainly taking it to another level this year. I don't know if the consistency is going to be there. He still has just a bad fastball, and he throws it too often. I don't know. I think he's just given up one home run so far this season. I do think he could still have home run problems, and he's still got to work on that pitch mix. But obviously, what he's done so far, certainly results-wise, has been encouraging, and the Cardinals are going to give him some runway. So I'm willing to roster him to see where it goes, but I'm not overly optimistic, I'll say that.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on to our deep league hitters to end the show. We've got yet another rookie, and maybe I should have even thrown this guy in the priority ad section. I wasn't totally sure. Maybe you'll tell me that I should have, but Luke Keyshaw got the call for the Twins. He's actually James Anderson's number 20 overall prospect. I'm not totally sure how anyone fits into the Twins roster. That's one reason why I included him in the deep league section. Twins are dealing with some injuries at the moment. I mean, they're always dealing with a Royce Lewis injury. Willie Castro banged up, as well as is Matt Walder. So there's more playing time to go around, but it is a pretty flat roster where they could very easily just go to some other options. But Keyshaw, he is a player who can definitely hit. Not totally sure what his defensive value is. He's a second base / DH probably. But throughout the minors, good strikeout and walk numbers in particular. And more than just that, in 102 games from high A and double A last year, he had 15 homers and 23 steals. So good plate discipline, some power, some speed as well. That's a pretty interesting player. His season last year was cut short by Tommy John surgery in August, and it was actually a surprise, I think, that he was ready to go in game action to start this year, but he didn't actually crush it in 14 AAA games, was about a league average hitter, but did show that good plate discipline and stole 4 bases, and now he's getting his chance. I don't know if there's star upside here, even though there's power and speed, and I don't know about the guarantees of playing time. But there's certainly some upside here if he does carve out a regular role. There's a lot of things to like in Luke Keyshaw's profile. So am I talking myself into him as an actual priority ad? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if he would fall into the priority ad for me, but I have noticed that James is very high on him. So, I mean, he's certainly worth a look to see where it goes. I would reserve him more for deeper leagues. I'm going to stick with the Twins with my next recommendation, or my first hitter recommendation, with Edouard Julien. Also kind of a second baseman. Could argue that he doesn't really have a position because he's bad at all of them defensively, but what he has done is started in the leadoff spot five games in a row. He's also started overall 15 of the last 16 games for the Twins. Got off to a slow start, but over the last 10 games has been a little better. 750 OPS, hit his first home run of the season. He has a 349 expected WOBA versus just a 286 WOBA, so he's been a little unlucky thus far. So far has produced a 12.12% barrel rate. Julien is a guy who's, when he was a fairly highly thought of prospect, it was because he drew a ton of walks. He's actually kind of gone back on that this year. His walk rate is way down, but his strikeouts are also way down as well. He was kind of hovering around 33% going into this season. That's down considerably this year. I was fairly excited about him going into last year, but then he was terrible. He's getting another opportunity this year. I don't know if it'll last because he doesn't have much room for error, because I mentioned the defense is not good. So he really needs to hit in order to get that runway. But I think Edouard Julien is still interesting enough that deeper leagues, he's worth a look, especially why he's in the leadoff spot for the Twins.
Yeah, I am a fan of Edouard Julien. I would be happy to see him hold down that leadoff spot, show that excellent plate discipline. Really interesting player there. I'm actually going to insert a guy here and combine my last few into one, because Dustin Harris has been mentioned here in the chat, and I want to get your thoughts on him because he's somebody who I remember picking up several years ago in a keeper league and then dropping because at the end of the 2021 season, he actually peaked as the number 22 prospect here at RotoWire, but then kind of fell off gradually and then quickly, and then actually fell entirely off the top 400. But he's getting some chances now with the Wyatt Langford injury, and in 6 games, he's hitting 400. I don't know if the playing time is going to still be there. That's why I didn't include him on here originally. But somebody who stole 35 bases in the minors last year, 41 the year before that. The bat, unfortunately, has fallen down to pretty mediocre. I think it looked like he was more of a power speed guy when he was in the lower minors, and now it looks like mostly just speed. Is there anything here? Would you actually attempt to pick him up in a deeper league, or just throw him deeper on the waterfall because the playing time just might not be there for very long?
Yeah, I think he probably falls more into the latter camp for me. I think Langford is due back today, I believe.
Right.
So I'm just not sure that the playing time is going to be there. Jock Peterson has been abysmal in the early going this season. I can't believe they want to kick him to the curb, but maybe Harris can get a few starts at DH. But, if you look at the counting stats in the minors, certainly interesting with Dustin Harris. But as you mentioned, from an offensive profile, he didn't quite hit as much as he moved up. So that lessens my enthusiasm for him.
Yep, I think the enthusiasm should be lessened. I always forget how to speak once we get past an hour here. It's a good sign that we should wrap up soon. But would agree, less interest or enthusiasm in Dustin Harris, but still maybe some. If he's still on the roster come Sunday night, then I think it means that Texas actually sees a role for him. And in that case, he might run enough to matter. That's where I'm at for now. You got one more player for us?
I do. Another lefty bat here. Alex Verdugo back from the dead. Batted leadoff for the Braves on Friday. Unfortunately, went 0 for 5 his first start. I do think he's going to get regular run in the outfield, though, for the Braves. I mean, between the injuries they're dealing with, the suspension of Jerks and Profar, he should play at minimum every day against righties. I think he probably get some run against lefties as well. I mean, Jared Kelenic has just not looked like he's going to turn the corner. The fact that they stuck Verdugo in the leadoff spot makes me think he's definitely going to get plenty of playing time. It was not good with the Yankees last season, but prior to 2024, a career 281 hitter. Truist Park is a top 10 park for home runs for left-handed bats, so maybe he can squeeze what little power he has out of it with a favorable home park. Certainly not an exciting player, Alex Verdugo, but if he's going to be batting leadoff for a while for a team that theoretically should have a good offense, and he's been an above-average major league hitter for the bulk of his career, even if it hasn't resulted in a lot of counting stats goodness in your deeper leagues, I think he's worth a flyer.
Yeah, classic deep league player there. Somebody whose value comes from his playing time more than anything else, but it should probably be there in Atlanta. I'm going to end the show with not just one player, but maybe 3 or maybe 15. I don't totally know here. Every single Rocky who is kind of interesting. So I have this as Kyle Farmer or even Mickey Moniak or Adael Amador, who's recently called up. The reason I'm saying all your Rockies is, well, if you're listening live and can add someone right now, then you'll get 5 of the next 7 series at Coors Field. If you have to wait until Sunday night, you'll get 4 of the next 6, and you really actually get a stretch of 4 out of 5 because they'll be in Kansas City early next week. But from April 25th through May 11th, the Rockies will only have a single series on the road. So I would try to look at whichever Rocky was not quite good enough before. They're good enough for this next few weeks, and then they're not good enough again. Kyle Farmer is the top one here because he's actually been hitting pretty well and playing surprisingly often. Mickey Moniak actually showing some things, maybe in a very tiny sample. A few of his underlying numbers look a little bit better. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I've watched this for far too long as a Phillies fan to get excited about Mickey Moniak, but he is striking out just 20.5% of the time and has a 13% barrel rate in 16 games. Then Amador, who recently got the call up, he really struggled last year, but he is a real prospect. He may be just too young, but this could be the year where he starts to show more. Really, it's that schedule we're going to have again. If you can get them right now, if you're listening live in a daily moves league and these guys are nearly good enough, if it's a shallower league, it's probably some better Rockies. Maybe it's Michael Tolia is just not quite good enough and has been dropped. Whoever it is, basically, whoever is just on the wrong side of the line for the Rockies, this is your time to go get them. So are you in? Are you buying any of those Rockies?
Well, I mean, Amador is the most interesting, but like you mentioned, I'm not terribly optimistic that he's ready to hit at the major league level right now. I guess it's probably Kyle Farmer because he had already been playing pretty regularly even before more injuries set in for the Rockies, and he's been a league average-ish hitter at times. Could receive that Coors Field boost. So if you're looking for a short-term play with a favorable Rockies home schedule upcoming, I would probably go to Kyle Farmer in a redraft.
Well, it's always fun when you can end the show with Kyle Farmer, get everybody really excited. But thank you, Ryan. Thank you to everybody who hung out in the chat. We had a pretty busy one today. It's going to be a pretty busy weekend. I think this is the first really exciting Fab weekend. I just want to see what the highest number is on Chandler Simpson. Let's throw out a guess. Over under 65%. Is that insane for the highest bid in the main event? Am I was way off here thinking that somebody's going to go crazy? Should I have set the over under at 45? Where would you set it?
I would take the under there, but I don't think that's an unreasonable over under in the main event.
You think 50% something? You think it'll stay under 60, but over 50?
If it's 50%, I would take the over. I think it's probably somewhere in between there.
All right. Well, I'm going to be looking forward to see just where that settles, as well as all the other rookies we talked about today. And we'll be back next week on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Vivid Seats.